Scuderia Ferrari is set for a challenging comeback in the Qatar Sprint Race. Despite performing well in free practice, the Maranello team's car struggled with understeer during the sprint qualifying session on soft tires. While significant effort was put into optimizing performance over a single lap, the drivers couldn't fully exploit the potential of the tires in SQ3. Regarding race pace, Charles Leclerc fared better than his teammate thanks to the experimental floor, although neither driver focused specifically on long-run simulations. Work carried out by Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz on the hard tires alternated between push laps and race pace laps, relying solely on adjustments to the engine map. Interestingly, both Ferrari drivers betted in 2 sets of medium tires with simple outlaps. This approach aimed to stabilize the tires for the main race and mitigate the early graining issues seen in Las Vegas. In contrast, McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull devoted the middle portion of free practice to more extensive high-fuel runs on medium tires with heavier fuel loads. Max Verstappen approached testing differently, running nearly 2 seconds slower than his competitors. From the onboard footage, it was evident that the Dutchman maintained stable tire temperatures and executed the longest simulation among the top drivers. His performance improved progressively as the car's fuel load decreased, with minimal signs of tire wear. Meanwhile, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris, and Oscar Piastri ran with lighter fuel loads. Oscar Piastri was the fastest on track, finishing over a second ahead of his teammate. Looking closer at McLaren, the team adopted differing fuel strategies, with Piastri simulating the sprint race using a fuel load comparable to that of the Ferrari drivers. However, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc, trailing by about half a second, were disadvantaged by their tire compound. Additionally, they had logged more laps on the white-banded Pirellis, which delivered less consistent performance. These factors complicate any direct comparisons and make definitive conclusions elusive. On the other hand, Lando Norris's run aligns more closely with the Mercedes duo of George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, who used roughly half-full fuel tanks. The Mercedes drivers completed around 10 laps each, gathering a wealth of data for their engineers. The 7-time world champion carried a heavier fuel load than his teammate, which affected his cornering speed. George Russell, in contrast, displayed better traction but compromised corner entry to prioritize exit speed. These differing strategies across teams leave many variables to consider ahead of the sprint race, setting the stage for an intriguing battle. An analysis of tire wear data reveals that overall, the feared graining issue caused by low track temperatures was absent. Unlike in Las Vegas, drivers were able to maintain a lower slip angle without damaging the compound in the opening laps, allowing them to push throughout an entire stint. This season, tire degradation appears to be less pronounced, thanks to cooler temperatures, less aggressive track surface texture, and smoothed curbs. These factors have given drivers greater confidence in tire management. Focusing on specifics, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, and Max Verstappen demonstrated similar improvements despite following different work programs in the same competitive setting. Only in the final portion of his stint did George Russell's performance decline slightly, but overall the W15 looks capable of competing for top positions in terms of race pace. The combination of lower temperatures and a stiffer suspension setup enabled the Mercedes car to perform well, even on a circuit that is not traditionally favorable to its strengths. The technical team opted for a setup that generates sufficient tire temperature without causing overheating. Additionally, the car's stable platform allows the floor to operate effectively, though at the cost of some mid-corner speed. For Ferrari, assessing long-run performance is more challenging. However, their tire management with medium and hard compounds seems solid. During free practice, the drivers found a good thermal balance in the tires, which translated into better performance as the car's fuel load decreased. In modern Formula One, tire management is a critical factor for performance. Failing to optimize tire usage significantly limits a team's competitiveness, and during the first qualifying session of the Qatar weekend, Ferrari exposed its vulnerabilities in this area. The issue, exacerbated by unexpectedly cool temperatures compared to those in Saudi Arabia, left the Maranello team unable to adapt effectively. The Q3 session served as a clear example, with the Ferrari drivers appearing uncertain about how to proceed, compounded by insufficient support from the pit wall. In the sole practice session available, Ferrari focused heavily on balancing the car. They conducted extensive laps using the hard compound to achieve consistent performance. For Qatar, the team opted for a medium-high downforce rear wing, a decision aligned with most other teams. While not reaching the maximum possible level, the setup was slightly below optimal. Significant efforts were also made to validate the updated floor, featuring modifications around the edge. This upgrade was briefly tested by Carlos Sainz in Las Vegas during the first practice session, while in Losail, it was Charles Leclerc's turn to trial it. Encouraged by positive feedback from car number 16, Ferrari decided to retain the updated floor for qualifying and the sprint race, with the option to revert to the older specification if needed. During the limited 60-minute session to fine-tune the cars, Charles Leclerc was instructed to perform several controlled laps on the medium tires to test the floor. These runs, conducted without the use of aero rakes or flow-vis, relied solely on load cells. Meanwhile, the soft compound remained largely untested, leaving questions about its performance for the sprint qualifying session. During qualifying, both drivers complained about significant rotation issues, which proved to be the primary obstacle to unlocking performance. The cars suffered from understeer that transitioned into oversteer during corner exits. While the cars did generate substantial downforce, a positive takeaway for the Maranello team, the inability to maintain the target tire temperatures robbed them of critical grip. This was an unexpected setback for Ferrari, which had designed a warm-up strategy that initially seemed effective. Adding to the poor result was a setup that failed to perform optimally under the cooler conditions. Ferrari was caught off guard, neglecting to make setup adjustments to counteract the lack of rotation. Instead, they relied on data gathered during FP1, convinced that the right tire management strategy would yield the desired performance. Unfortunately, this approach proved ineffective, and once again, the two SF24 cars displayed significant untapped potential. Performance that could have made a difference was left unrealized due to poor execution. McLaren demonstrated exactly what Ferrari was missing: excellent balance, achieved through optimal tire management. The MCL38 featured a sharp and precise front end that worked harmoniously with the rear, maintaining stable alignment between the two axes. The McLaren cars dominated the first two sectors of the track, while Verstappen claimed the fastest time in the third. McLaren's tires activated more quickly, a characteristic trait of the Papaya car, while Ferrari opted for a delayed activation strategy, aiming to benefit from greater grip across the rest of the lap. Ferrari's primary challenge remains the activation and temperature retention of the soft compound, especially at the front. This tire is unlikely to be used in the race, with the medium compound expected to be the preferred choice for the sprint race. Even so, starting further back on the grid significantly complicates Ferrari's battle with McLaren. The drivers will likely aim to attack at the start, aware of the difficulty of overtaking on the Qatar circuit. This strategy will require careful tire management and a hope for stronger pace in the closing laps.